Before we begin, thank you very much to K Noah for joining the Patreon campaign over at patreon.com/TJOmega. Every little bit helps keep the channel alive, keeps the content coming, and every bit of it is genuinely appreciated. Thank you so much for basically letting me continue to make these dumb videos. Oh, and we have a dumb one today. Oh boy, do we have a dumb one today. So, once upon a time, I did, well, really the start of this video streak that was like 2 months ago was the secret origins of TJOmega, where I let everyone know that yes, once upon a time, I was a fanfic writer. Not a dirty one, just a fanfic writer. But that was with mostly Digimon. I didn't really dabble into anything that was relevant to the channel. Nothing that went public, anyway. So I thought, let me open up my ancient text file of what I had planned if I was to actually do a Transformer fanfic, because I'd actually developed quite a lot for one, and never really got around to writing it. Somewhere in my head, the entire story still exists. It's just never been put to paper is all. And I don't think I ever want it to be. So it's just so the creative energy isn't wasted. 10 plus years after the fact, this is what the fanfic would have been. I think there's like 15 years. This is pre TJOmega. This is pre most everything I was doing online. So at the very top, this is a text file that was basically just quick profiles to give me an idea of just how to keep characters, keep their goals focused and keep track of who they were and what they were going to be going through. So main character was Omega's Prime, and now that might seem familiar to you if you listen to the WTF at TFW podcast or know me from TFW 2005 in general. Yes, that was my original screen name there. The whole point originally was going to be to join the website, and start posting this story on the fanfic forum. So I named myself after the main character that I had conceived, which was a Maximal Griffin. The thing about my Beast Wars story was that it was all based on mythical creatures. The idea in this show, and the idea in this one was, rather than scanning local life forms, they were going to a planet that had none. So, to affect actual beast modes, they took DNA samples with them. DNA samples that got damaged, scrambled in their initial Predacon attack, and caused some of them to mutate into these hybrid forms that resembled, what we would know as mythical creatures. And most of them were actually intentionally designed in that way. The idea was that with the damage to the DNA, they had to piece together what worked. So a griffin managed to work, that kind of thing. It was a convoluted way of explaining why they were all mythical animals, but that was one of the things I was always disappointed about in Beast Wars. They didn't do nearly as many mythical animals as they should have. So Omega's Prime was a griffin. The idea was he's going to be a young leader character similar to Optimus Primal, but actually kind of focus more on the fact that he carried the name of Prime, which, has significance. He didn't feel himself worthy of it. He kind of would have gone through a little bit of the Rodimus thing without, the sheer, oh, I just want to, someone else be a leader. I'm going to be a kid for the episode. Nothing like that. Just difficulty in actually, finding himself as, a leader. Next up, we have Wavebreaker. I really liked Wavebreaker. She is a hippocampus, which basically a merhorse. In the mythological one, where it's the back end of a horse that's actually like a fish, not a fish fin, but more like a dolphin. Her idea, the concept for her was she's gonna have the attitude problem. But she's also gonna be the best one on the battlefield. So she had difficulty with the alt mode until she stole a little bit of Predacon tech to be able to float. That was another thing in the story. If we get down to it, I want to get through all the characters, and then if I have time, we'll go through some of the story beats that I was going to hit. But yeah, she was going to be the attitude problem girl, but a lot of things I came up with her were fun. She was very anti-authority. The opposite of which was Blockade. He was basically my Rhinox type. He was going to be more. He was going to be even more pacifistic. He didn't want to carry a weapon. He carried a repulsor rifle. So the idea was, yeah, he was very anti-violence, but a lot of his was more spiritual, more so than even Rhinox. Rhinox had a couple episodes in that, but this guy was all about, like, you know, not like a crusader or anything, but, you know, very much like harmony with oneself, etc. And there's a few battles that he was going to win just with words. So that's kind of where I wanted with Blockade. And yeah, he was going to be a Catoblepus, because what I found out was a lot of mythical animals are just normal animals with wings. So I had to start finding mythical animals that did not have wings, and Catoblepas, however you want to pronounce it, that fit the bill. I put in my own take on Hot Rod. So I had to put a Phoenix in the story, so of course that seemed like a natural approach. His whole storyline was going to be about outgrowing his hero worship of the G1 legend, the former, Autobot leader, and becoming his own person, beyond, what he was originally designed to emulate. The design for him, as you can see on the screen, the tail of the Phoenix actually rotates up to become the Hot Rod fin. The story, if it actually reached the conclusion, he was going to discard that fin, which would have just left him with a flame tail in beast mode, and adopt the name Heat Streak. So just completely remove himself from the Hot Rod identity. So he was gonna be the young Maximal growing up. That was the point on him. Stratowing, which is a name I still really, really like. Honestly, I like a lot of the names I came up with this one. So Stratowing was a basic Pegasus. He's the scientist of the group, but I wanted him to be a more combative scientist, like actually like good in the battlefield. His whole thing would have been like he knows the necessity of battle, and views battle as a science of its own. He would have been too calculating, way too full of himself. Getting along with his fellow Maximals was going to be his thing, as well as just learning to improvise more instead of trying to calculate everything, going by gut instinct. I never really came up with too much story-wise for him. He was mostly just an excuse so I could have someone making all the tech and explaining all the things going on. I probably would have come up with something eventually. We had my Sphinx, Sandlinks. This one was pure pacifist. Her only weapon was going to be a shield that was kind of Captain America, but it was all micro thrusters and things, so she, instead of like bouncing it, she could direct it. Yeah, and she was going to basically be kind of a moral compass. Very innocent, very young, and also just something to kind of pull the Maximals back, when the war's taken them too far. She would have been something that would have helped Wavebreaker kind of settle down and stop being so aggressive. Just to kind of dial back and realize, oh, I'm going too far. She was gonna have she was gonna be a focus of a romance in the story too, which we'll get to in a bit, because I had a different take on something the Beast Wars did. So the Maximals needed a little bit more firepower because I put in pacifists. So we came up with Darklock, the Cerberus. Darklock was he was very edgelord, and intentionally so. He would have had a thing with Wavebreaker, not a romance, more of a respect, a kinship. Again, even more anti-authority. Spent most of his time outside of the base, prone to even attacking Maximals if they got on his bad side. That kind of character. He would have come around eventually. partially because he had a brother named Shatterpoint. He's an Orthrus, which is a Cerberus minus a head, essentially. Close combatant. He didn't have any kind of, he didn't really have any kind of weaponry. I wanted someone to be just a martial arts style character. His bio would have explained that he and Darklock were part of the same experimental group that created Protoform X. I kind of took a nod from Marvel, where they retconned Weapon X to actually be Weapon 10. So there was an 11, a 12, etc. They were going to be part of, Protoform 11, essentially. But when X went out of control, the spark was that immortal spark was split in half. Half of it was Darklock, half of it was Shatterpoint. So, twin sparks, essentially. So that was the idea. And Shatterpoint was we're gonna get to a certain other character, and then we'll explain where Shatterpoint came from. Okay, and then for my villain, we did Galvatron. And the twist here is that he genuinely was, or at least by appearances, seemed to be the original Galvatron. Somehow returned to life. He was a Chinese dragon. Once upon a time, I think I came up with a transformation scheme that wasn't part for me, but I could have been wrong. So I adjust my chair because I'm uncomfortable now. But yeah, design-wise, I think he was my favorite one to actually do. You can see him in the upper right corner. I might, either on Twitter or somewhere else, I might post up like the full art that I did for some of these. I wish I had the art for Omega's Prime. I don't think I ever scanned it. But you can see that I'm so much better at drawing than I was when I made these sketches. So they are pretty rudimentary, but they're a visual example. And I really do like the beast elements I threw into Galvatron to get his look correct. But yeah, the idea behind Galvatron here was going to be he was lunatic enough to think he was the original. And there's big story elements to that as well. He was more calm, though. He was more calm. He was collected, very calculating. But the idea was that when he got riled up or angry, he reverted to like G1 Galvatron kind of instinct. All right, so moving on, we have my Hydra, 6 strike. This was going to be a Predacon general. Like the general of the Predacon armies, who's just kind of bored being planetary defense. He wanted glory of combat. He wanted the honor of victory, and he can't get that just being, basically being a guard for the planet. So when Galvatron offers the chance to, basically lay conquest to the galaxy, oh, he's right on board with that. He would have been a more noble character. Like, the idea behind him was going to be he was a juggernaut. Like, probably more powerful than Galvatron, at least physically, but definitely not, he is ultimately a soldier. He wants, he will, follow the commands of one he thinks is worthy of his abilities, and that was what Galvatron was. He was going to be like a turning point in the storyline where maybe, Galvatron's gone too far, or things are different now. Okay, I'm taking control here, and we're not gonna. But like, he was just supposed to be like next to impossible to beat. That was his whole deal. Triadtron. The Predacons, I will admit, the names started giving me trouble. I wanted to avoid any names that were directly referential to their beast modes, the way that Beast Wars did. Because I didn't want to go through that explanation of, well, they change their code names when they go to a new planet, and they name themselves after their new beast modes. Like, I never liked that. I'm just going to give them consistent names that aren't tied to anything. Triadtron kind of slipped there. He's a chimera, so he's got multiple heads. The idea was he was supposed to be like a maximal covert agent, but psychologically could not handle what he was going through, so he invented a completely new persona and identity in order to like compensate for the missions that he was supposed to be. Mentally, he turned into a completely different person, and that led to like a Man-E Faces type thing, where or an animated Blitzwing, where he had different faces for different goals. But when those faces started taking over, yeah, he started falling in line with the Predacon ideals. So that's where Triatron was. And him, like, kind of finding an inner peace, partially thanks to Blockade, that was going to be his story arc. And this is where I really, like, I wish I could have come up with a better name for him, but Basilisk was my bioengineer, his, like, the big deal weapon guy on the Predacon side. You see his design, you see his design right next to me in the layout. Yes, there is a chicken on his head. That was going to be the source of great amusement. In the story, I was going to have the chicken, like, active like an actual chicken, like looking around and, like, cawing. It would have been funny in spots, but he himself is a very very toxic character. His thing was he agreed to help Galvatron because his own experiments were killing him. So this was going to allow him the freedom to try and cure his body without any kind of maximal laws getting in the way. And in the meantime, yeah, he's part of like a big thing in the background of the story. Never really got to, like, fully write that out. But yeah, he was going to be interesting. He was going to be, like, just the insane one on the group. Saber Wind. Hippogriff. So Saberwind is similar to Dinobot in that he is honor-focused. He is very much, he's like a super efficient at his job, and he kind of became obsessed with superiority to the point where he really wanted to take out Omega's Prime because their beast modes were so similar. A hippogriff and a griffin. You basically just swap a lion for a horse, and there you go. Saberwind was also a big believer in fate, so that's why he joined up with Galvatron. But it's also why he bonded with Sandlings. They get stuck together, and he doesn't think it's coincidence that they were united. That's where my little romance was going to come in. It was going to be an inverse of Silverbolt and Black Arachnia. I was going to pen a scene where they came across the protoform for Shatterpoint and his stasis pod, but the spark was so weak that they had to do something desperate, which was to use their own sparks to jumpstart Shatterpoints. So it was going to create a, like, parent situation, which I thought that's at least that it's a familial relationship is not something you can often explore in Transformers. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to include that. Would have led to some interesting story beats, I think. All right. Backlash, a Manticore. So what I liked about this guy was he was going to be a maximal protoform awakened by the Maximals, and after seeing how Omega's Prime and Galvatron each lead and learning learning what Maximals and Predacons were all about, he was going to side with the Predacons. He was going to willingly join the Predacons because he honestly believed that Galvatron was wrong. I was going to play him for laughs a little bit with a crush on Wavebreaker, just so they could have a little bit of, like, how Quick Strike was always, like, hitting on Black Arachnia, that kind of thing. One-sided, of course, but he would have been interesting, especially as Galvatron was going to get destroyed at some point in the story before the ending, and when they find out what was really going on, they were going to start switching allegiances. Backlash still, like, being in his original programming, not modified in any way to become a Predacon, would have been, like, one of the linchpins for switching back and, like, uniting the factions. And the last one I have here is Eclipses, a Wyvern. He was going to be the experimental protoform, kind of like X, but, like, as twisted as Basilisk could make a potential Predacon. yeah, he was a really twisted character, and he was very much in the Starscream role. He wanted to take over for Galvatron. It's like Six Strike respected Galvatron's leadership, and that's why he never steps up to him. Eclipses has no care. Eclipses knows he is powerful, knows, in his mind he is superior to Six Strike and Galvatron, and he's going to prove it at some point. I never really got to write much for him. He was going to be a late entry into the story, and probably die pretty horribly. So, God, I'm already 20 minutes into this. Do I really want to keep talking just to get in some of the story beats? I'll get to a few. I don't want to go too far. So I explained the DNA samples and all that. So that's how they get their beast modes. Galvatron at some point was going to be revealed as he's not the original Galvatron, he's a clone, because the planet that they are on, I took a note from Energon. Wait, I'm trying to think when the timeline of this was. I actually don't think it was. I don't think Energon was a thing yet when I started this, but or maybe it was. God, it's been so long. The idea was going to be that the head of Unicron from G1 had reconstructed itself into essentially an Energon battery by essentially ending up in the middle of a sun. He was going to, the idea was he was going to basically bathe the planet in so much Energon that he could terraform it and reconstruct himself from the planet. So it was Unicron is rebuilding his own body kind of thing. And that's how I explained Energon buildup in this series without Energon deposits. The sun itself was giving off Energon radiation because Unicron's head was generating it. So that was how I was going to get the Energon limitation in there. If I can remember what else was it going to be? Yeah, it's like this is just a ton of story beats. There's no moon on the planet. Nighttime is very dark, but it's also when there's no Energon radiation, so it gets dangerous for both sides. There's so much just random stuff. I had a whole explanation for where tech went in Beast Wars, from why aren't there null rays and all those kinds of and teleportation, all those kind of random things that were in G1. Why can't Predacons freely fly like Decepticons could? All that kind of stuff I had explanations for. I even explained the maximal upgrade, which was okay, so they can eat plants now, so that's part Headmaster, Power Master, because they're able to incorporate organics. They're a lot smaller and more energy efficient, so that's where Micromaster tech went. Their beast modes, they don't fold up or break apart as much as the G1 characters did, and they rely more on shells. So that's your combination Action Master and Pretender, using Pretender tech that hangs from their bodies to compensate for the Action Master's lack of transformation ability. Literally, I was trying to find all of these different elements of G1 in the Beast Wars designs and kind of explain where the tech went and what the beast designs were. That in between, that shift over, it amazes me to this day. The shift between G1 and Beast Wars has never been explained or explored properly. There's a few stories out there, but none actually tell how did the war end? How did they actually come to a peace agreement? Where did all this technology go? How do they reformat an entire planet? You never really see that kind of stuff. I'm kind of shocked that we never did. Let's see. Blockade was going to sacrifice himself at some point. There was some conspiracy about where the tech went. Yeah, Galvatron had his whole plan, the project for the Immortal Sparks, etc. I only got about a chapter and a half into the actual writing of this story. So all I really have in my head are the beats of it, the big moments that were going to occur, and then 80% of it technically does not exist because I never got around to just connecting the dots. So it stands as it is, a loose idea of what a mythical-based Beast Wars story could be that still exists somewhere in the back of my head, but, you know, hey, I've got enough on my plate without trying to finish a story that, you know, is just way, way beyond its time anyway. But hopefully this was interesting to some people out there, just to know what goes on through, like, the story writer in my head. Or at least a story writer from, like, 15 some years ago. Good Lord. But hopefully this was just interesting to somebody, because, you know what? I don't know, I just want to basically this is a video is just an excuse to show off a storyline that I never really got to show off to anyone. So, I hope someone out there enjoyed it. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.